What's going on, my boys? It's Nick coming at you on the channel, finally, with something that I've wanted to bring to you guys for a while. This is a deck that I've been cooking up behind the scenes and testing with vigorously, so much so that this is like one of my favorite decks that I think I've made on this channel. And for those of you who have been longtime subscribers, I thank you so much. You may remember that I made a Numeron Egyptian God deck profile about a year ago at this point. And it was a deck that I built for a friend of mine who had recently just got into Yu-Gi-Oh! And was a huge fan of the Egyptian gods and wanted a deck that would play them. The problem was that even though we got the Egyptian god structures about a year ago, like those structures really didn't do enough to help the Egyptian gods out and fix the inherent problems that the deck had. So I came up with a Numeron variant, and that version worked. However, over time, you know, with format changes and ban lists dropping, that deck kind of lost a lot of the spark that I felt that made it great. So it was time for an update, and given that the Egyptian gods did get new cards in the most recent Megatins, I decided to pick the deck up again and work on it. So I have that profile here for you today, and as you guys saw from the thumbnail and the title, this deck is a complete monster mash, and even though it seems like they wouldn't go together, honestly, it works almost seamless. It's so perfect how these cards come together and actually make a cohesive strategy. So with that being said, for those of you new to the channel, welcome. My name's Nick. We do live duel videos, deck profiles, deck discussions, and all things rogue related, different unique styles of decks. So I highly encourage, if you're watching this and you've made it this far into the video, please hit that subscribe button, help me out. I'm trying to get to that 1,000 subscriber benchmark by this year in 2023, and I think I definitely have a chance of getting there with your guys' help. And like I said, we're gonna go ahead and dive in. I want to explain that ever since we got the new cards out of the most recent Megatin, I think that Obelisk was the one that made way with the best support, because the Obelisk cards we got out of that Megatin honestly fixed the issues that I had with the Egyptian gods in the first place. It was getting them to field, which the Breaking Ruin God addresses, and also searching the Obelisk, which Soul Energy Max addresses. The cool thing about this is that if you're not familiar with these cards, for starters, obviously, I assume you guys know what Obelisk is and how he works. He's an Egyptian god. He's 4,000 attack and defense. He requires 3 tributes to be normal summoned. When normal summoned, cards and effects can't be activated. And while he's on the field, he cannot be targeted by card effects, which is absolutely huge. Just a 4K untargetable beat stick. And he's got another effect which seldom comes up, but you contribute 2 monsters to destroy all monsters your opponent controls. However, this card cannot declare an attack the turn that effect is activated. Now, what's cool about this is the new spell we got out of the Megatins, the Breaking Ruin God, is a quick play spell, and it states that the activation of this card or its effects cannot be negated, nor can its effect be negated. So pretty much, it's almost like Super Poly. When this card... Well, actually, it's a little bit different than Super Poly, but when this card's activated, the effect of what it does can't be, like, negated. The opponent can respond to it, but whatever they respond with can't stop this from happening, which is crazy. And it allows you to special summon an Obelisk the Tormentor from your hand or graveyard. Just absolutely nuts. This fixes the whole issue that the gods had, which is getting them to board. So you special the Obelisk for free. Then, and if you do, it's unaffected by your opponent's card effects this turn. So you literally summon out a 4K beater from your hand or graveyard that on a card that the opponent can't negate, and then you get a unaffected 4,000 beat stick for the turn. Granted, at the end phase of the turn Obelisk was summoned, he does send himself to the graveyard, but that's fine. Like, this thing is just so huge, and it's unaffected, like your opponent literally can't do anything about it, which is crazy. Then if that wasn't bad enough, if you tribute 2 or more monsters you control at the same time to activate your card or effect while you control Obelisk, you can banish this card from grave to then banish all monsters in your opponent's graveyard. And if you do, inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each. This is like a blowout against like Tier Lament, honestly. Like getting rid of their entire grave and burning them for 500 is insane. So this Breaking Ruin God is one of the craziest support cards I've seen for the Egyptian gods. Then we have Soul Energy Max. This card is... I still can't believe this card when I read it. If you control Obelisk the Tormentor, whose original attribute is Divine, in your monster zone, you tribute 2 other face-up monsters, destroy as many monsters your opponent controls as possible, and if you do, inflict 4,000 damage to your opponent. Yes, you heard that correctly. This card, as long as you control Obelisk, will allow you to tribute 2 monsters you control, blow up all monsters your opponent controls, and burn them for 4,000 damage. That is nuts. And if you activate Energy Max, and you have Breaking Ruin God and Grave, because you activated an effect that tributed 2 or more monsters at the same time, it meets the Breaking Ruin God secondary trigger, which means you can banish it from grave, banish all monsters out of the opponent's graveyard, and burn them for 500 additional damage for each monster banished. So these 2 cards alone can literally just like burn your opponent for game, even if they were at 8,000 life. It's absolutely incredible. So I totally wanted to build a deck focusing solely around these cards, and that's why Obelisk is the one that we're choosing to main deck in this particular list, as opposed to main decking like Slifer or Winged Dragon of Ra. So hopefully that answers some of the questions you guys might have had. Just for reference, we are playing 2 Obelisk, 2 Breaking Ruin God, and 2 Soul Energy Max in this list. Also, I think it's important to note that during the main or battle phase, you can banish the Soul Energy Max from your graveyard to add an Obelisk the Tormentor from the deck or graveyard to your hand. Then, immediately after that resolves, you have the option to normal summon an Obelisk the Tormentor. So, literally, these 2 cards fix all the inherent issues, like I said, that I had with the Egyptian gods, in terms of like not only getting them to your hand, but also putting them on board. So we're playing 2 of each of those cards for this particular list. And I think, like I said, you guys are going to love this deck list. It's absolutely insane. It's 42 cards. So now that we got that intro and that a bit of explanation out the way, let's dive into the rest of the deck profile so you guys can see how we're actually summoning Obelisk and facilitating that trap and spell. So starting things off, we are still playing the Numerons. They don't take the central focus like they used to. They kind of sit more on the back burner or like an enabler, but they're not really like your actual starter, although they can be depending on your hand. So triple copies of Wall, it gets you to network, which leads you down your Numeron line. And then this card also functions somewhat like a pseudo battle fader, where if you've taken battle damage, you can special this card from hand and then end the battle phase. So it helps you prevents you from getting like OTK'd by anything silly. Moving on though, we have a Dinomorphia package in this deck. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. So I figured that the Numerons were still the easiest way to get material on board to hard summon Obelisk if you drew it, because it's just an easy way into like 4 free monsters, plus potentially up to 4 draws. Then you can just summon Obelisk using the Numerons as material. However, if you're playing the Numerons, they don't allow you to do anything else on your turn. So you could commit to like Obelisk or commit to like a Link 4, but then I wanted cards that could do things on the opponent's turn, and obviously Dinomorphia fit that bill perfectly. So we're playing triple copies of Dinomorphia Theresia. I know that they just got that brand new trap announced for their theme, and it's cracked. I'm so glad that I have these cards because Dinomorphia is honestly very fun to play. So Theresia, upon normal or special, she can let you set a Dinomorphia trap directly to your spell and trap zone. Then if her life points are 2,000 or less, she gains 500 attack. Dinomorphias have this thing where they want your life to be as low as possible, so the lower you can get it, the better. Then if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish a trap from your graveyard to then special a level 4 or lower Dinomorphia monster from grave, except a copy of herself. So triple Theresia, very, very good Dinomorphia card. Then we're on the 1 Diplos. Diplos is pretty much like the card you don't want to see. You just want to send it from deck off your Dinomorphia traps to make your fusions. So just 1 copy of Diplos. Then we're playing 2 copies of Lord of the Heavenly Prison in this deck. You're going to find out really quickly that this deck is very trap heavy, and Lord of the Heavenly Prison is not only a way for you to search out your trap cards and spells, but also a way to put a free 3,000 body on board that can be used as tribute fodder for Obelisk, his effect, or the effect of Soul Energy Max. All of which you need to keep in mind. And in addition to that, he can also protect your back row from being destroyed, which is really crucial since we are playing Dinomorphia and they do play quite a decent amount of traps. But if you thought Dinomorphia wasn't enough, I still wanted to push this deck even further, and I wanted engines that could literally play on the opponent's turn all day long. That way when I have Obelisk on field, I can continue to summon this like non-stop influx of monsters to serve as tribute fodder for the Soul Energy Max, so I can nuke my opponent's board and burn them for 4,000 damage, because why not? So, enter the Golden Boy. We play 2 copies of Eldlich the Golden Lord in the main deck. Eldlich is just a really insane card, whether you're going first or second. Going second, he serves as like, a board breaker of sorts, being able to like discard himself and a spell trap from hand to target any card on the field and send it to grave. Then out of the graveyard, he can send like spells and traps you control to grave to revive himself, and then he becomes 3,500. Attack and can't be destroyed by opponent's card effects until the end of the turn. So 2 copies of Eldlich, obviously, to feed into our engine there. And that rounds out the monster cards. Now we're going to move into the spells. 1 copy of Fist of Fate, just because this deck does focus on summoning Obelisk the Tormentor quite often. And Fist of Fate is a card that they got out of the Egyptian god structure. Pretty much it's a non-target effect negation. Then, once you negate that monster, it destroys that monster, negates effects of that monster in the graveyard and cards on field with the same name. And if you activated this card during your main phase, it also is a Harpy's Feather Duster. Insane card is a one-of. Again, you need Obelisk on board, but since this deck gets Obelisk on field pretty often, having it as a one-of is fine. Then we're on the 1 copy of Mound of the Bound Creator. This is a really cool tech choice in this deck because a lot of the cards we summon happen to be level 10. Cards like Obelisk, obviously, cards like Eldlich the Golden Lord, and cards like Lord of the Heavenly Prison are all level 10 or higher monsters, meaning that while you have Mound of the Bound on the board, none of these cards can be targeted or be destroyed by the opponent's card effects while Mound of the Bound is on the field. And if a level 10 or higher monster you control destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to grave, you can burn the opponent for an additional 1,000 damage. So I just thought Mound of the Bound is a really cool tech card. Not to mention, if the opponent destroys this, it lets you search for Obelisk from deck to hand, which is really, really cool. Then, of course, we're on the 1 calling, 1 network for the Numeron line. Like I said, the Numerons don't really take the central focus of this deck. You just want to be able to Numeron once to either gain access into Obelisk or get access to a Link 4, which will explain what we're playing for that when we get to the extra deck. But just 1 and 1 is all you need. You're going to burn through the Numerons and that's it. You don't got to worry about them again for the rest of the duel. It's pretty much just a 1 and done kind of situation. But moving on, we're on the 1 copy of Called by the Grave and 2 copies of Forbidden Droplet. Droplet, I think, is really amazing in this deck, allowing you to pitch cards from your hand or that you control to negate opponent's monsters. You can pitch stuff like Soul Energy Max and then activate its graveyard effect to be able to search Obelisk from the deck to your hand, which is really, really cool. So just 2 droplets and 1 called by is all you need. Then we're playing the 1 Prairie Reese map in this deck. This is actually a card that we play to search out our copy of Numeron Wall. However, Prairie Reese map has the added benefit of having your life points to do so. What's cool about this is because we're playing Dinomorphia, having your life is something that's actually beneficial to you. So playing the 1 Prairie Reese map as an additional Numeron Wall effectively is really strong, and the fact that it halves your life is just even better because it plays into what the Dinomorphias want to do so easily. Then we're on the 3 copies of Memories of Hope. Why? Because if we gain access to the Numeron line, we want the ability to draw 4 cards for free, dig deeper into our deck to find our trap cards and things that we need. So who doesn't want a double pot of greed in their deck? Then moving in, that rounds out the spells. Now we're moving into the traps. 3 copies of Elixir of Scarlet Sanguine. This allows us to summon Eldlich from deck or graveyard, just providing a big beater to our field that we can use as tribute fodder for Obelisk or use as fodder for the trap card Soul Energy Max. However, we do need to be cautious as to when we use this, because when we do, we are locked into zombies for the remainder of the turn. So as long as you're careful with your activation on Sanguine, it's really not going to bother you all that much. And like I said, it just gets you to Eldlich from deck or grave. Then of course we're on the 2 copies of Conquistador, just as an additional body we can summon to field to either tribute for Obelisk or get tribute for our trap card Soul Energy Max. So Conquistador is nice, just being able to set it and then summon it as a body is really nice to have that additional card on field. Obviously, if we have Eldlich on board, it also becomes a disruption because then it can pop a card on field non-target, so that's pretty cool. And then the Conquistador can banish itself from grave to actually set a Scarlet Sanguine from our deck to the field. So it's like this recurable resource, and obviously Sanguine can banish itself to set a golden land as well. So we get this recurable loop of just free monster advantage that we can use, so we always can ensure that we have the fodder we need to summon Obelisk or use his ability or the ability of the trap card. But moving on, 3 copies of Dinomorphia Frenzy. This card is the bread and butter right here. You want to see this as quickly and as often as possible, and you'll see why once we get into the extra deck, because the card this lets us summon is absolutely crazy. So 3 copies of Dinomorphia Frenzy, it just allows you to, during the opponent's main phase, you pay half your life as cost, and you fusion summon into a Dinomorphia monster from your extra deck by using only one monster from your deck and one monster from your extra deck as the fusion material. Then we play the one copy of Dinomorphia Domain. I actually prefer the Frenzy over Domain in this list simply because we're only on 3 Therese and 1 Diplos. If we played more copies of Diplos, then I would entertain playing more Domain. But because we're only on the 1 Diplos, it just doesn't make sense to max out on this. This is just another trap that allows us to fusion summon into a Dinomorphia fusion during the opponent's turn by using material from our hand, field, and deck, which is really strong. So just 2 copies of Domain. Then rounding out the Dinomorphia traps, we are on 1 copy of Dinomorphia Shell. Now you're probably wondering why we're playing this. This is actually a neat way for us to kind of like chum block our opponent. Let's say they're going to beat over like one of our small monsters. If we activate Shell at the start of their battle phase, we can summon a Dinomorphia token. That token is a level 10 dinosaur monster with 0 attack and 3000 defense, and the turn the token was summoned, the opponent can only attack that token, which is really crazy. So not only does it put another body on board for us for free that we can use to tribute for Obelisk or use as fodder for the trap, the Soul Energy Max, it's also a level 10. So if we also have Mound of the Bound creator on our side of the field, the token also cannot be targeted or be destroyed by the opponent's card effects, which makes it pretty difficult to deal with. So that's why we play the copy of Dinomorphia Shell, just to summon out that big Dinomorphia token and serve as an extra monster on our field to make our plays. Then we're on the 1 copy of Ferret Flames, just because we do get our life to dangerously low levels, and why not force our opponent to shuffle their entire board back into the deck because they can't leave a monster on field whose attack would exceed our life point amount. So 1 Ferret Flames. And then rounding out for the trap card lineup is just triple copies of Solemn Judgment in the main. This card is almost like a staple for any Dinomorphia deck, so we might as well just play it at 3. So moving on to the extra deck, we are playing, obviously, Dinomorphia Fusion. So we're on 2 copies of Rexstrom, 2 copies of Kentragina, and 2 Stealth Bergia. Now, the Rexstrom obviously is the star of the show here. For those of you who are on Master Duel, you guys are probably really familiar with this card. It's pretty much a walking skill drain. Basically, your opponent cannot activate the effects of monsters they control, whose attack is greater than or equal to our life points. Now, since this deck is designed to get its life point total so low, you pretty much get to a point where your opponent can't activate any effects because all of their monsters' attack exceed our life. So Rexstrom is just a huge like skill drain pretty much, which is just prevents our opponent from playing. Kentragina also gets bigger the lower our life points get, and she can banish a Dinomorphia trap from grave and copy its effect. So she can like allow us to copy Frenzy and then allow us to make a Rexstrom, for example. And then the Stealth Bergia, we really don't go into this that often. We mainly use it as the fodder we need off of Frenzy just to make the Rex. But there are instances when Stealth Bergia does come up, but that's the ratio of the dinos we are playing in the extra deck. And obviously Rexstrom is just being a walking skill drain as like the cherry on top for this deck. But then we play 1 of each of our Numerons, just so we have that package. You know, being able to access the Numerons, obviously, and have the potential to draw 4 cards off of cards like Memories of Hope, then consolidate these for the summon of Obelisk himself, or a Link 4, which you'll see shortly, is something that just can't be overlooked. Then we're on the 1 Evil Dolka, just because if we have Diplos and Therese on field at the same time, we can make a Dolka, and it's a non-once per turn monster negate, which is huge. Then we also play the Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Gustav Max, because we do play a lot of level 10s in this deck, and if we get our opponent low enough to a point where they're sub 2000, we can just make this main phase 2 and burn them for the rest of their life, which is really simple. Then for our Link 4 of choice that we play is 1 copy of Saryuja Scaldred. Why? Because he allows us to dig even deeper into our deck and fix our hand a bit, draw into more cards, and put back the stuff we don't want to see. He can also let us special summon a monster from our hand once per turn, which, keep in mind, can be the Obelisk. And anything that's summoned to a zone he points to just gets a 300 stat boost so Saryuja's like the perfect monster for this deck. And then for the last 2 monsters you play are just 2 links, 1 Codebreaker Virus Swordsman and 1 Nightmare Phoenix to round out. This is just generic spell trap removal. And then this we actually play because in the event that we go down our Numeron line and like that combo gets snuffed for whatever reason, like let's say like, you know, one of the cards gets destroyed or something upon its summon and we're just left with 3 and we can't get to the Saryuja, then we take 2 of these and make a Codebreaker Virus Swordsman. Why him specifically is because actually upon if he gets destroyed by battle or card effect, during the end phase, he actually revives himself. So he's just a link that puts itself back on field. So like self-replaces, which again just gives us an additional body to summon Obelisk if we needed to tribute, or gives us an additional body for the Soul Energy Max trap, which this deck abuses a lot. So that rounds out the extra deck, guys. Let's jump into the side deck before we end this video. Side deck is pretty straightforward. We play triple copies of Ra's Sphere Mode, plus the 1 Winged Dragon of Ra on the side to make going second much easier. Just being able to clear your opponent's board with the sphere, and then on your turn being able to summon the Winged Dragon of Ra from deck, ignoring its conditions, is great. We side deck the 3rd copy of Eldlich the Golden Lord for when we know we're going second, or if we know we're going against a deck that like plays a heavy amount of Bystials, for example. We just side in the 3rd Eldlich, that way we guarantee we always have an Eldlich in rotation. And speaking of Bystials, I just want to point out that yes, most of this deck is comprised of lights and darks, but there are so many lights and darks in this deck, and the deck really doesn't play out of the graveyard that much, so like there's not enough Bystials in the game that can stop what this deck wants to do. It's absolutely cracked. But moving on to the for the rest of the side, triple Cosmic Cyclone, 1 Duster for our back row heavy matchups. The Cyclones are great because they pay 1,000 life as cost, so it lowers our life point total, which again, Dinomorphia wants their life as low as possible. So just removal for our heavy back row matchups is great. Then we're on 2 Ferret Flames in the side. In the event that like, you know, you just want to side into these and just have more removal that doesn't target or destroy, Ferret Flames is really good for that. Then we play the 2 Haquero in the side as well, in the event that like we want to side out of the Conquistadors from the main and side into Haqueros, maybe against like our Tearlament matchup if you want more graveyard control. Haquero's really good for that. And then for the last 2 cards in the side deck are 1 copy of Dinomorphia Brute, again in the event that we just need more removal to throw at our opponent, and then 1 copy of Dinomorphia Reversion, which is really cool in this deck because it allows us to copy the effect of any counter trap in the graveyard, which means we technically play 4 copies of Solemn Judgment if we side into Reversion, or we play 2 copies of Shell if we side into Reversion. So that rounds out the side deck, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this rather unique and somewhat insane deck. Again, it's a 42 card deck, and even though it might look like none of these cards go together, I assure you that this deck runs so smoothly and effectively. So stay tuned. I will be uploading a combo tutorial for this deck list on my channel. So hopefully, like I said, if you guys made it this far into the video and you haven't subscribed yet, I really don't know what you're doing. Hit that subscribe button, like the video, comment down below on what you thought. And like I said, stay tuned for more really awesome content that I have coming your way. And stay tuned for that combo tutorial video that I will be doing showcasing this incredible 42 card Obelisk, Numeron, Dinomorphia, Eldlich hodgepodge, or whatever I don't even have a good name for it yet. Maybe you guys can chime down below in the chat and see if you can think of a name of what I should call this deck. But with that being said, guys, thank you so much for your time. Like I said, like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next video.